Jujutsu Kaisen Chapter 267 is here, and it reveals that the series has come to an end. The author, Gege Akutami, has confirmed that the finale will take place in 5 chapters. In the last chapters, we have been shown that Number 1. Yuji has just locked in, telling Sukuna that he can kill him easily. Number 2. Megumi returns and Sukuna will die. And number 3. Yuji will become the new king of curses, sealing Sukuna within his fingers. To better understand Yuji's role, we need to look at the statue from chapter 265. That statue wasn't Buddha or Jizo. Everyone thought it was, because Buddha holds great symbolism with both Gojo and Yuji. The hand signs Yuji makes are actually a nod towards enlightenment. Yuji tries to save others before saving himself. The statue is actually Kanon or Guanin, the bodhisattva of compassion, which ties perfectly with the fact that Sukuna has seen Yuji trying to show him compassion. Yuji is, in a way, a manifestation of Guanin. Guanin is a mythological figure that inspired characters like Hashirama from Naruto Shippuden or even Netero from Hunter x Hunter. Yuji has shown several similarities to this deity throughout the series. Compassion. Both Yuji and Guanin represent a deep desire to alleviate suffering. Yuji risks his life to save others, while Guanin, the bodhisattva of compassion, dedicated her life to freeing others from suffering. Sacrifice. Yuji constantly puts himself in danger, becoming Sukuna's vessel and even willing to do it again in this chapter to protect others. Similarly, Guanin postpones her own enlightenment to help others achieve theirs. Both face suffering, with Yuji from the first episode needing to come to terms with death and pain, while Guanin constantly suffers with the cries of the world's people. Death and rebirth. Jujutsu Kaisen clearly illustrates the cycle of death, similar to how Guanin helps people move past suffering and samsara, the cycle of life and death. Redemption. This is what Yuji seeks as he bears Sukuna's sins, like those from Shibuya, and Guanin seeks redemption for others. Both go through suffering for the sake of salvation. But to better understand chapter 267, we have to go through 266, that shows Megumi speaking again after a long time, saying enough. Yuji seems shocked and tries to listen to what Megumi has to say. Megumi says that he wanted to create a world where Tsumiki wouldn't suffer in vain. His sister, you might recall, was possessed by Sukuna's crazy ex-girlfriend, whom Sukuna killed just to make Megumi suffer. Megumi says he at least wanted to do everything he could to help her and would have liked to see her doing normal things. Maybe even seeing her together with Yuji. That would have made him happy. But he says, I've had enough. Yuji responds by talking about how when his grandfather got a lung cancer, he was given a very difficult treatment with many side effects, but he refused it. Yuji speaks about euthanasia and how he never understood what those who refuse treatment are thinking, but after living through what he did at Jujutsu school, he starts to understand what people without hope go through. That's why Yuji says he can't tell Megumi to keep living. He understands if Megumi wishes to die. Sukuna returns to his complete form, and the two prepare to face off for the last time. Sukuna considers using Gojo's technique of resetting a technique within another's domain. This explains that Sukuna can fight without being overwhelmed by power in someone else's domain. As birds fly, Yuji and Sukuna engage and begin to fight. Even though Yuji grabs Sukuna once and uses his ability, which somehow allows Yuji to break the barrier between Sukuna and Megumi's soul, to the point that Sukuna will slip out of Megumi's body. Yuji gets knocked down, Sukuna punches him again, sending him flying, and then jumps after him, chasing him. As Yuji rises again, Sukuna is stunned because for the first time in his life, someone is looking down on him, and he's furious. He hates Yuji for what he's done and that all humans will suffer the consequences of his actions. We then jump into Megumi's inner world, where his childlike manifestation asks Yuji what's up with his face. Yuji starts crying, telling him that he will be very lonely and sad without him. In the real world, Sukuna tries to invoke the technique of the 10 shadows and realizes that Megumi from within is blocking his techniques, because Yuji broke the barrier of the soul and lifted him from the bath. Yuji punches Sukuna right in the face, and as Yuji starts smiling, realizing that Megumi still wants to live after all, it seems like he jumps towards Sukuna. Yuji punches Sukuna repeatedly and Sukuna jumps back, grabbing Yuji by the head. They both repeatedly punch each other in the head, but Yuji hits him hard enough to shatter Sukuna's technique. It appears that Yuji's attacks can't be healed by the reverse curse technique. This is because Yuji affects Sukuna's soul and not the physical body, while the body can can regenerate, the soul cannot. As we saw with Mahito, if you alter someone else's soul, their appearance will change, which is why Sukuna will no longer be able to regenerate if his soul is affected. Yuji cancels his technique, and his hand returns to normal. Yuji notices that Sukuna has regained his technique using Gojo Satoru's method, and tries to expand his domain. Unfortunately for him though, Yuji has another ace up his sleeve, and it seems he cancels Sukuna's domain with his own. Or not, it's revealed that now that Yuji's hand has returned to normal, he's missing 2 fingers, which he previously had when his hand was in the other form. Well, one was broken off by Sukuna and swallowed by Megumi, which is why it's in his body. Or if Yuji regenerated, it seems that Yuji ripped off his own fingers. One finger similar to the ones where Sukuna was sealed can be seen tied up and somehow locked away. The author notes that the fight is reaching a climax. What does this mean, you ask? Well, just as Yuji gave Sukuna a chance to redeem and save himself, he now has to show him the consequences. Yuji is willing to kill him and has the power to do so. Yuji has weakened and destroyed the barrier between Megumi and Sukuna's soul, which is why Sukuna is now fighting both Yuji and the spirit inside Fushiguro, until Sukuna eventually leaves the adversary's body and returns to his own. And as we saw in the earlier episodes, it's possible that the two will have another internal fight, just like when they made the pact, but this time Yuji will be the one to win. And in the end, he will seal Sukuna back into the 10 fingers, except that this time they will be his own fingers, one that is already prepared for sealing. Chapter 267 begins with a flashback between Yuta and Gojo, where they discuss Sukuna's last finger. If you remember, Sukuna was missing a finger, which he eventually replicated by consuming his own corpse from the Heian era, and now the last one is in Gojo Satoru's possession, which he wanted to give to Yuta to replicate Sukuna's shrine. The problem is that they can't read the brain. As Gojo says here in Yuta's body, he can't meet the condition for copying it, and that this finger is one of Sukuna's 20, which is insufficient for Rika to analyze the necessary information to replicate the shrine. Yuta says he doesn't understand much about the cursed speech techniques either. Gojo says it's not worth the risk, and that if he wants to copy the shrine technique, Rika's condition is that she must consume a part of the target's body. The part consumed varies depending on the target and how many times the part has been used. To copy a super powerful technique, it's necessary to consume a crucial part of the sorcerer. Even if that crucial part is consumed, the condition can be set through a binding vow to limit the number of times the technique can be used. But then comes the question, what if the user heals with reverse curse technique? Yuta explains that, for example, if he consumes Gojo's arm and replicates Limitless, if Gojo regenerates his arm with reverse curse techniques, the copy technique will be nullified, because the consumed body part will be left without cursed energy. An example will be Inumaki or Kurusu/Hana, whose arms couldn't be restored through medicine or reverse curse techniques, which is why they decided to use them. Yuta says this is why they should keep this plan as a last resort. He will give Yuji the necessary information for his plan, and although Sukuna and Yuji resonate, Sukuna will still not be able to read Yuji's plans, just as Yuji couldn't read Sukuna's thoughts. Yuta believes in Yuji's ability to use the shrine, as it's engraved on his body, and Gojo has already confirmed this. We return to the present where we see Yuji's 2 missing fingers in front of Sukuna. It seems that Sukuna notices the 2 missing fingers, and as I mentioned, he broke his pinky when he swapped bodies with Megumi. He also remembers Yuta's words that he consumed the last finger. Sukuna realizes that Yuta tricked him, and that when Yuta copied his technique, it wasn't Sukuna's, but Yuji's, since Sukuna's technique was engraved in Yuji, and he could have used it in the future. This means Yuta consumed Yuji's finger to replicate the technique, while Sukuna's real finger is still somewhere. Yoshinobu talks about how Sukuna's finger is a special grade cursed object, and that it resists any kind of attack. But if instead of destroying it, they think about utilizing its powers, that could work. They talk about someone who woke up half an hour ago, and this someone is none other than Nobara Kugisaki, who returns from the dead with a large patch over her eye, saying, "Smile, boys." We then see her using her nail technique on Sukuna's finger. Sukuna is completely affected by this technique, and it essentially explains why he can no longer use his domain expansion, allowing Yuji to defeat him easily. Nobara and Yuji appear together on the page. Still, Yuji uses dismantle on Sukuna, who had his guard down, fully affecting him. Yuji then punches Sukuna straight in the face, but Sukuna counters by hitting Yuji directly in the stomach. Sukuna thinks he can't be taken down that easily and that Yuji must be exhausted, having already used his reverse curse technique and pushed past his limits, including using his domain. It ends here, Sukuna says to Yuji. At that moment, Yuji punches him twice, delivering a delayed double impact. Yuji says it's time to end Sukuna, to end this cycle of curses, to end this Jujutsu Kaisen. He then hits Sukuna directly with a black flash, which makes Sukuna go black out, and then the author says that it's the end of an era and a very long fight. With a little help from Nobara, Yuji has just defeated the King of Curses, Ryomen Sukuna, for the first time in the entire series. Yuji is indeed probably the strongest sorcerer in the present, unlike in the past where Sukuna wasn't killed but sealed in 20 fingers. Yuji has just now defeated him, but in my opinion Sukuna's soul still needs to be sealed somewhere, unless he enters Samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth. The Calling Games arc was constructed by Kenjaku to prepare the world for the merger. The plan is to merge the non-sorcerer world into Tengen's body to evolve it. If this happens, curses won't be a problem anymore, but society itself would fall into chaos, leading to wars or huge massacres. Yuji is Sukuna's nephew and somehow his heir, the closest to fulfilling the power that Sukuna holds. Therefore, replacing the original 10 fingers with those of someone who shares his DNA is a perfect and fitting conclusion. Gege Akutami will finish the series in 5 chapters, meaning this will be probably the final battle. We'll likely get a conclusion about the entire Jujutsu society and curses, because even if Sukuna dies, curses will still exist and will continue to kill people, as fear and negative emotions will continue to manifest in this world. This is where Yuji comes in. With his religious symbolism, he will guide the world towards salvation and the elimination of these emotions. Yuji will become the new King of Curses, and in the end, only he and Megumi will remain, unless Megumi decides to die. We'll catch up in the next video. Sayonara.